What's up, Domino community? I'm Lily Hevish, and today I'll be teaching you how to build a domino cube. So get your dominoes and let's start building. The cube technique is a super useful type of domino structure. This can be used to make pretty much any shape. So expanding the cube technique, you can make a prism with any length, width, or height. And this is extremely versatile when you're building domino structures. I would consider the cube technique as one of the most important types of structures to learn. And this is an extension of the tower technique. So if you haven't seen that tutorial yet, I definitely recommend checking it out over here first. The cube technique is pretty much the same as the tower tutorial, except instead of a 2x2 base, we're gonna start with a 3x3 base. But you could also do 4x4, 5x5, or any amount of dominoes on the sides. Now, when people refer to making a 3D structure, but they don't specify the exact technique, they're usually referring to the cube technique because this is the most standard type of domino structure. And we're gonna learn how to build it right here. I got my H5 domino creations, so we're all set up, ready to build. The first step in making a domino cube is to place dominoes horizontally on your building surface, and we're going to place a line of them one domino height apart. So if I take this other domino and use it as a measurement tool, I can place it right here and measure it so it's one domino height from edge to edge. And now we're gonna continue this line until we have 6 in a row. Now I'm gonna make this a 3x3 domino cube, but you can make this base layer as long as you want. The only thing to note is there will always be an even number of dominoes that are parallel facing this way. So now that we have the first layer of parallel dominoes here, we're going to repeat the same layer, but we're gonna move it down over here. Now the distance between these two rows, similar to the tower tutorial, should be 1 domino height minus 2 domino thicknesses. These should overlap by approximately 1 domino thickness. So we're gonna continue building the parallel dominoes. Everything should be aligned. And if it helps, you can also get a ruler or straight edge and just use that as kind of a guide to make sure that everything is aligned up. And again, the distance between these two should also be 1 domino height minus 2 domino thicknesses. And when you're using a straight edge, it's really easy to measure it all out because all you have to do is mark the far ends of the dominoes. So if I measure out this one and I know that's 1 domino height minus 2 domino thicknesses, then we just have to do the same thing on the opposite side here. Measure that out, make sure that's all good to go. And then everything else in here should be aligned. So now we can just place the dominoes on the ruler and match it up with the dominoes that we placed already. And if needed, you can also use your domino as a measurement tool on the side like this, just to be sure. So once we have that, we have a perfect 6x3 grid. And the reason we call this a 3x3 domino cube is because we have 3 dominoes that are facing outward on the side. Now you can make a cube pretty much as large as you want. You don't have to stick to 3x6. You can do 3x8, 3x10, 4x4, 10x10 if you really want to. No matter what size or shape you make the structure, the technique is pretty much the same. The only thing that changes is the amount of dominoes that are inside the structure. The outer layer will always be the same for the most part, but the inside will just have more dominoes inside of it. So it's very easy to just learn the 3x3 cube, and then you can expand that to making 4x4s and 5x5s. Now for the second layer, we're going to take dominoes and connect the entire outer border. So I'm going to start by placing dominoes right here. Now this blue domino should overlap by 1 domino thickness. Now it's really important that these first 2 layers are incredibly precise because this will set up the entire structure, because you can't really move the base layer once you build it. Once you set up the first layer, everything on top of that has to follow it. So if the spacing between the rows is off just a tiny bit, I would recommend taking that time to fix it because it's going to be kind of a hassle if the base layer isn't very precise. And we're just gonna go all the way around the cube. Now with the cube technique or structure technique, you'll notice that on some layers, they create a border and then an inside. So we have just created the border, which goes around. Now we're going to place the inside. And the inside are typically just parallel dominoes. So you won't see dominoes that are changing the orientation. They'll all be in the same direction. So for this, we're going to place dominoes on the inside. And this is going to create a grid of 2x4. That's the general structure structure of how I like to think about making cubes. There's an inside and then there's a border. And everything on the inside is pretty much just parallel dominoes. For the third layer, we're gonna start again by making the border. And we're going to place dominoes on the corner here and just follow the outside, tracing the entire square. Now it's really important that the dominoes you place are very precisely on the dominoes underneath them. You don't want any dominoes that are overhanging, and you don't want dominoes that are off center like this. You really want to make sure everything is even and balanced. And when you look at it from the top, you don't see any extra dominoes hanging out underneath it. So now that we have the border done, again, we're going to place the inside, which is another row of parallel dominoes. So we're going to place the dominoes like this, and pretty much just connect the blue dominoes that we placed on the previous layer. There we go. Now the third layer is pretty much the same as the second layer, except it's rotated 90 degrees. And the fourth layer is also the same as the first layer, except that is also rotated 90 degrees. So the fourth layer is gonna be a complete layer of parallel dominoes, except now we're gonna place them in this direction. There we go. So now that we have this, the cube technique will repeat every 4 layers. So you just have to repeat what you've already built and make it as tall as you'd like. I'm going to continue making this a little higher just because it's pretty short and it's not going to topple when it's so low. So I'm going to keep repeating until we get a full cube. Now, if you memorize the pattern, you might not need to do the entire border first and then the inside. You can kind of build in whatever section you want, but I think it's just helpful for people to visualize how to set it up to make the border and then separate that from the inside layers. So here we have the 3x3 domino cube. Now I should note, it is important when you're making domino structures to make sure that it is high enough that there are enough dominoes that will crumble into the structure to keep the chain going. I would generally recommend 13 layers when you're building a structure. However, because this is a 3x3 cube and I'm trying to make all of the sides, including the height, the same distance, we're going to just stop it at 10 layers and take a little bit of a risk. Now before we connect it all, I do want to point out a couple of interesting things. Similar to my tower tutorial, in the cube structure or just structure technique, you'll also see the 3 domino window gap on the sides. And you'll also see columns on the faces of the cube. So for example, we have a column here, we have a column in the center and on the right and on all of these sides. So to topple a structure or domino cube, it's typically best to pull out a domino using string or knock it down with something that's heavier, like maybe it's a bigger block or a book. But for now, I'm just gonna use my own H5 Domino Creations field starters. So we got 2 sets of field starters. We got some tape, scissors, and string. So first we have to choose a domino to pull out of the cube. And typically this domino should be 4 to 5 layers from the top layer. So if we look on this side, I'm going to pull out this blue domino here and right here. And similar to the tower tutorial, it's always best to take out the domino that's in the middle of the X. So for example, this would make an X here, and this would also make an X here. And because all the dominoes are facing in the same direction on the X, the one in the middle is easiest to take out. Now because I finished the cube, I will have to unbuild a little bit of it in order to reach these dominoes, but if you're planning ahead as you're building the cube, you can attach the string as you set it up, instead of having to like unbuild it and then rebuild it again. Now it's important to note, I would not recommend toppling a structure that's very large using field starters because these are going to be too light and they won't have enough force to push over the dominoes. So that's why we're using string to pull out a domino instead of having the field starter topple into the cube. Alright, so now we're gonna take this blue domino and we're gonna tape the string to it. Just like this, so it's not overhanging the domino. And now we have to figure out the distance that the string should be. So I'm just gonna very carefully set up the field starters. I'm putting it far enough away from the cube that I still have room for a line to curve into it. So if this domino is in place, we're gonna wanna tape the string to the other side of the field starter. But we wanna make sure that there's enough slack in the string that it still has enough room to tip over. So I'm gonna very carefully place the domino. And keep in mind, I placed the domino in a way that the tape is on the inside of the cube, and that will allow the string to rotate the domino from the top in the back. That's a little bit more of a better angle to pull it out from instead of the bottom. So a good rule is when this field starter is tipped over 45 degrees, the string should have no slack. But I'm gonna mark the string here, and then we're going to cut it. And now we can also tape it. And it's important to note that I taped the string on the side that this field starter is going to fall on the ground. So it's like the field starter is going to fall on the string. So that way the string gets pulled from the top of the field starter instead of, for example, here, it gets pulled by the tape. So to avoid that, it's safer to put the string in this direction. So now that we have that, we can put the field starter in place. And for added precaution, I'm going to tape down the field starter so it's like a one-way tape hinge. So this will just ensure that the field starter is not going to slide back. It's going to fall exactly in that direction, so it has a more clear like pull when it takes the string and the domino with it. Now we're just gonna repeat the same thing for this blue domino. And I would recommend placing these so that it topples in the direction that's directly in line with the domino that you're going to take out. So the force of these field starters are toppling in this direction, which will be perfect to pull out the blue domino. And the reason why we're using field starters is because a taller domino like this has more room for a string to pull this domino out. If I were just to use a normal domino to pull the string from the ground, there's not a lot of room for this string to get pulled. So I always recommend using a taller domino to pull out the string. Now we can finally finish the cube, and now all we have to do is make the line connecting to the field starters, and then we can topple it. So this is the domino cube. We've made a 3x3 domino cube. We're going to pull out the domino that is 5 layers from the top using field starters, and I think it's gonna work. Even though it's a little bit lower than the recommended 13 layers, because we're knocking it down with 2, it should be okay. 3, 2, 1, go. So if we watch this in slow motion, the domino line falls, which splits and hits the 2 field starters, and the strings get pulled, which knocks out the blue dominoes, and everything on top of that falls into the cube, which then crumbles and hits more dominoes, and then the entire thing falls over. Now again, the cube technique can be used in so many different ways. You can make it a long prism, you can make it a big tower, you could even have it turn on a right angle and go in different directions. There are really so many things you can make with the cube technique, so I hope this helps you with your own domino projects. I would love to see them, so if you do post anything, just use the hashtag H5DominoCommunity on Instagram and Twitter. I'll be checking through those and sharing them around. If you need dominoes, I recommend my own H5 Domino Creations, which this is our brand new 3-pack of 60-piece H5 Domino Creations. So you can get literally 3 all in one. So you get 180 dominoes for a super discounted price. Definitely check it out. I'll put a link at heavish5.com/buydominoes. These dominoes are made in collaboration with Spin Master, and I can guarantee you these will be the highest quality dominoes for setting up and knocking down, so definitely check them out. And before I go, I want to give a shout out to our featured community member, Domino Nana. Thank you so much for leaving this detailed comment. I always love hearing what people learn from these videos, so I really appreciate that. And as always, I'm Lily Heavish, and keep on building.